Welcome to the next installment in my video lecture series in economics. And in this particular video lecture, we're going to be taking a look at supply. Um, in the demand videos, I had several videos, separate videos. And in the supply one, I'm going to consolidate that and do one video covering the topic of supply. As always, I try to give the appropriate attribution. So any information that is in quotes in this video comes from the textbook that is listed here on this particular slide. As always, there's a few terms we have to get straight when we're taking a look at supply. So quantity supplied is the amount of a particular product that a firm will be willing and able to offer for sale at a particular price during a given time period. And the supply schedule shows how much of a product firms will sell at alternative prices. Excuse me. A few more terms. The law of supply is the positive relationship between price and quantity of goods supplied. An increase in market price, ceteris paribus, will lead to an increase in the quantity supplied and vice versa. And the supply curve is just a graph illustrating how much of a product a firm will sell at different prices. So the supply curve is the graphic representation of the information that's in the supply schedule. So here is an example of a supply schedule. This is for Clarence Brown, and this person is a soybean farmer. So it lists out the price per bushel of soybeans and how much Clarence Brown would be willing to supply at those different prices. So at $1.50, Clarence doesn't want to supply anything. At $1.75 per bushel for soybeans, he's willing to supply 10,000 bushels of soybeans. At $2.25 per bushel, he's willing to supply 20,000 bushels per year. And we also have the same information for a price of 3, 4, and 5. So that's what the supply schedule is it gives the different prices that Clarence could receive for his soybeans, and it associates the quantity supplied in a given year for those different prices. So if we take that information and physically graph it out, this will give us a supply curve. So all of these data points are directly from the supply schedule. So if we graph out that information that's in the supply schedule, that gives us our supply curve. There are other determinants of supply outside of the price of that particular product. The price of required inputs, land, labor, and capital. So if, for example, the price of land changes, excuse me again. So if the price of required inputs changes, the price of land, labor, of capital, that is going to cause the supply curve to shift. It's going to either increase or decrease. Also changes in technology that can be used to produce that product. There might be improvements in, let's say, farming equipment or pesticides, etc., or the seeds themselves. They might be more disease resistant. That would impact the supply curve, causing it to shift. And also prices of related products. For example, if we continue with soybeans as an example, if the price of corn were to go up dramatically, this might cause Clarence to produce less soybeans and more corn. So an increase in the price of corn would cause the supply curve for Clarence to shift to the left because he would be allocating less land for the production of soybeans. So one of the things we have to be cognizant of is the difference between the shift of supply and a movement along the supply curve. Again, this is something students oftentimes get confused about. So a movement along the supply curve is the change in quantity supplied brought about by a change in price, while a shift in the supply curve is the change that takes place in the supply curve corresponding to a new relationship between quantity supplied of a good and the price of a good. So if we're changing quantity supplied, we're moving along a pre-existing demand curve. We're just moving from, supply curve. So we are moving from one point on the supply curve to another point on the supply curve. So by changing the price, the quantity supplied of soybeans is going to change for Clarence. A shift of supply is that there's a fundamental change in the other determinants, which cause the supply curve to physically change its location, either shifting to the right or shifting to the left. So here's an example. Here is the original supply schedule. So the first two columns represent the original supply schedule. And the third column here is the new supply schedule because of the introduction of a disease-resistant strain of soybeans, or the seeds to grow soybeans. So previously, at $1.50 a bushel, Clarence didn't want to supply any soybeans per year at that particular price. But with the introduction of the new strain, the new disease-resistant seed strain for soybeans, he is now willing to supply 5,000 bushels per year. So what we're seeing is a new quantity associated with the pre-existing prices because of this particular change. So this technological change is causing quantity demanded to increase and quantity supplied to increase for every single price. So we can map out each of those individual ones. So previously at $1.75, Clarence was willing to supply 10,000 bushels per year, and now with this technological change, he's willing to supply 23,000. And we can do that for every single price that was listed on the original supply curve and in the supply schedule. So all we're seeing is that there's a brand new quantity supplied caused by this new development. So what we are seeing, if we graph that information, is here's the original supply curve. The new supply curve shifts to the right, representing the fact that this new seed strain has been introduced, and this is causing Clarence to want to supply more for all the given prices for soybeans. We can contrast that to a change in quantity supplied, which just means that we're changing the price of soybeans, and this is causing the quantity supplied to change. So we're just moving from one point on the supply curve to another point on the supply curve. So let's say at $3, he would have willingly supplied 10,000 bushels per year. If the price were higher at $5 per bushel, he would willingly supply 20,000. So the change in the price of soybeans is just causing a movement along the existing demand curve. It is not causing the demand curve to change its physical location.